Hey guys, welcome to Pistons Talk Podcast post game show. We have a special guest. Had to hit up our guy Sean Murphy as we are texting during the game. We are really hyped. Then the fourth quarter happened, and we're definitely gonna just kind of break down this game and the highs, the lows, and everything like that. But Sean, how you doing, man?
My guy, Anthony, I may or may not have agreed to do this when I thought it was going to be a very different show. But obviously, excited. Always look forward to coming on. Thanks for having me. Yeah, man, it was a very good back and forth game until it wasn't. So,
Yeah,
excited to talk some Pistons playoff basketball.
and I have to turn my Wi-Fi off because anytime I do a podcast for whatever reason, my Wi-Fi is just like low bad connection, but that's why you guys saw me reach back. I take quarter notes during these post game podcasts. I don't know if you do. You might just you told me that you're screaming so loud you scared your cat half to death, which it's pretty funny. But I kind of wanted to just get into like the first quarter a little bit, and I think something that we'll talk about is the early foul trouble. Not having Jalen Duren or Sar Thompson, I thought was going to hurt this team, but somehow the vets stepped up. Uncle Tobias Harris, Uncle T, Malik, they really carried the scoring load for this game. Like, what did you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I think that they had a really solid outing, the veterans did as a whole. I think it was expected that the young guys were going to take some adjusting in this atmosphere, in this environment. I mean, it's one thing to be playing your first playoff game. It's a whole other thing to be playing your first playoff game in the Madison Square Garden, when people are absolutely going crazy. So I think the level of play that they got out of Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, and Malik Beasley was all particularly really impressive. The thing that's difficult is it's tricky because you don't really know how much you can actually rely on that throughout the course of the series. So you kind of hope if you're the Pistons that like you didn't like get like kind of get that out of the way, so to speak, for lack of better terms. But I mean, I just think the big thing, like you said, was just the foul trouble of Asar Thompson having those two fouls in less than 3 minutes. He essentially missed him for an entire quarter. And then Jalen Duren getting in really early foul trouble, essentially forcing the Pistons to really lean on Isaiah Stewart, which obviously we saw him get hobbled and kind of how that turned out. So, yeah, I think some of those jitters were to be expected, but I was really impressed with how they responded through the second and third quarter.
I was too. I've kind of come to just expect early foul trouble from our young guys, especially Duran. It's kind of just been his MO throughout the season is sometimes he just gets his hand caught in the cookie jar and he gambles a little bit too much at times. And
Yep.
I thought there was a lot of times where he just flat out gambled and didn't recover enough. And I think the Knicks are just such a good team that they're going to take full advantage of that. They're battle tested, they're veteran tested. But to have a 27-27 score at the end of one, I thought was pretty good given this team's lack of playoff experience outside of the veterans on this team.
Yeah, I thought the fact that the Pistons were able to really keep it as close as they did, throughout really the first half, but especially like you said, that first quarter of, they really came out and got punched in the mouth. They were down 8-3 at the first time out. And you could just really tell that, the level that they were at, like you could just tell that they were really needing a few minutes to actually get settled in and to get adjusted to what this environment, what this level of basketball really is. I mean, the Knicks, you got to give a lot of credit to them too, as far as the level of physicality that they brought. You could tell that the way that they were defending Cade, as far as the way that they were blitzing him and trapping him, and also just the level of physicality that OG Anunoby brought to the table was something that definitely affected Cade, especially in the first half.
Mhm.
So, the game plan that the Knicks brought in game one was definitely really effective.
I'm glad you mentioned OG Ananobi because every time I was watching, he just popped off my screen of just the way he guarded Cade. I think a lot of talk. I'm sure you saw it. There was so much talk going into this week for both sides. I mean, I've seen people like Colin Cowherd, and I've seen guys like Udonis Haslam have different takes on this series. but I think you have to tip your cap to OG the way he defended Cade, and I think the game plan for the Knicks, it's not going to change. With the Pistons not really having a secondary creator and a scorer, this is where you kind of miss a Jaden Ivey, because you get the ball out of Cade Cunningham's hands. You saw tonight 20 turnovers, like 7 in the fourth alone. Like I think that's a game plan that the Pistons probably don't want to repeat for game 2 on Monday.
Yeah, and I mean, whenever the Pistons have struggled throughout the last few years, but especially this season, like turnovers have always kind of been an Achilles heel of this team. So not entirely surprising to see it affect them the way that it did, but it's the turnovers, and then also it's the 3-second violations in the lane. It's the five
Mhm.
second violation right at the beginning of the fourth quarter. It's a lot of those little sloppy things that you quite frankly just can't let happen that really start to add up over the course of the game. Obviously, there was that screwy offensive interference call with Tim Hardaway Jr. in there as well. There's just a lot of things that were just, when you get to playoff basketball, things just get weird, for lack of better terms. And you kind of have to weather the weird. And I think the Pistons, once they kind of got punched in the mouth and realized that the game was getting away from them, it was hard to recover.
Yeah, that Tim Hardaway Jr. play in particular, that was so weird because like the ball was halfway down, but I thought there was a foul on the call, but there wasn't, and then it was a Knicks ball, and then to your point, like this to start the fourth, a 5 second violation, and then another turnover, and then the Knicks go on a 21-0 run, which I know Terrence brought it up on the live chat watching on Twitter right now, saying 21-0 run in the fourth quarter will hurt any team. Our young dogs learned a lot this game, and I'm glad Terrence brought that up because this is a very inexperienced team outside of the vets that they have. This is a great learning experience for them. Um,
Mhm.
I think as a Piston fan, like if we win a game in this series, I think as fans, successful season.
Yep.
Even if they were able to play competitive ball like they did tonight, and maybe they just didn't have enough to get over the hump. I think at the end of the day, as Pistons fans, we didn't really expect a whole lot. Going into the season, obviously expectations changed when we won 40 games and fans started like really buying and believing into this basketball team. But what it's kind of like, you're just overall takeaways with that 21-0 run and like learning experiences with this basketball team right now.
Yeah, I think the level of intensity that the Knicks came out with in the fourth quarter really caught the Pistons off guard, right from the jump when they had that 5 second, that 5 second violation on the inbound pass. And then, from there, just all the different turnovers and the compounding mistakes. It seemed like a lot of times in that fourth quarter, but also in that run, the Pistons were trying to hit the home run ball and trying to get it all back in one or two possessions when in reality, they needed the poise. They needed, that's when they needed their vets to really kind of like step in and kind of like stop the bleeding there, so to speak. I think guys like, like Cade, I think he was really just trying to like, get things going and force the issue and try to make his impact felt on the game, but it wasn't necessarily in the flow of the game. And, there's just again just compounding mistakes, that cost the team in the long run. I saw people like going like, "Oh, this is on JB. He didn't have his team ready." It's like, first of all, it's one playoff game. It's one bad quarter after, you know, a really impressive second and third quarter where I thought the Pistons really for the majority of this game, I thought were playing the better game overall. So, I was really impressed with what they brought. But then I think it was just once you lost Isaiah Stewart, once had those turnovers really just start to compile and that composure just started to slip away, the lead and any hope of the Pistons coming back just kind of went with it. So I think the big thing is you expect this team to make mistakes, and ultimately it's about how they come back from them. As we've talked about, going into this playoff run, but also just all season long. The biggest thing about this postseason run is the level of evaluation that you're getting, and I think it's going to be really telling to see how guys like Jalen Duren, Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson bounce back and adjust and learn from a game one. Like they like going into game two, it's not going to be an environment that's foreign to them anymore. I think adjust and see things in film and apply them to the game. And it's going to be interesting to see not only on the Pistons side, health wise with Isaiah Stewart, but then on the Knicks side, you have Jalen Brunson, who had to go to the locker room briefly at the beginning of the fourth. There's a lot of guys on both sides that you're kind of like having to keep an eye on. So it's gonna be fascinating to see how this one develops. I think it would just be a lot easier for Pistons fans to stomach this type of loss if it hasn't been 6,172 days since the Pistons have last won a playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a graphic from ESPN saying like Pistons are 0-14, now they're 0-15. And the last time they won a playoff game, I was a freshman in high school, and I graduated in 2011. So it's been a minute.
It
So,
was the last time they won a playoff game was the day after my 11th birthday. I turned 28.
wow,
I turned 28 next month.
wow, man, wow, that's awesome that you're turning 28. I honestly thought you were older, but hey, man, respect, love it, love
I
to
take
hear it.
that I
But
take I take that as a compliment.
because you're very mature for your age. But I did want to get to some questions from people that are watching live right now on YouTube and Twitter. And it's a kind of an Isaiah Stewart question, and could Isaiah Stewart have made a difference in the fourth? Though, what do you kind of think about that? Given he came into the game with knee inflammation, and obviously for me, Sean, like I saw him gimping a little bit, but it seemed like it got progressively worse the more time he was out there.
Yeah, JB mentioned after the game that he chose to protect his player, and quite frankly, I think he made the right call, having the long view of the series. I mean, of course he would have had a difference, right? Like if he was healthy enough and looked like he did towards the beginning of the third quarter, because even when he was limping and not at his best in the third, he was still affecting shots. He was still deterring at the rim. He was still just a really stable presence. He is their best defensive big on this team. And quite frankly, I thought he handled the moment a lot better than a Jalen Duren did. And not just from an eye test standpoint. If you look at the box score, Isaiah Stewart was +8, Jalen Duren was -20. So that tells you everything you need to know. Not to pile on to Jalen Duren. He's one of the youngest players on the team. He's 21 years old. It was his first playoff game. Let's see how he plays, as the series develops. But it was apparent that the Pistons missed Isaiah Stewart when he wasn't on the court. And so, going forward in the series, if they don't have him, if they have to lean on a Paul Reed, it's going to be interesting to see, how much that affects them. And, I think something that we didn't necessarily fully expect to see from the Knicks, and something that they kind of actually did pretty well with, was that dual big lineup. Like they hadn't even played 30 minutes, Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns together, going into this game all season. And those guys actually, all things considered, played relatively well together. I think Cat, obviously with his experience playing alongside a Rudy Gobert, he looked really comfortable in that situation. So, yeah, again, it'll be interesting to see how these coaches approach adjustments and what things will look like in game two. I imagine that you'll see better performances from the young guys in Detroit.
Just to answer this question, I think you just hit it out the park. You definitely noticed the difference when Isaiah Stewart was out there in the second half and in the third quarter when the Pistons had their lead. Isaiah Stewart was out there. Not to say that Jalen Duren was a complete negative. I would just say he looked completely lost tonight, and that's to be expected.
Mhm.
It's his first playoff game. He's 21 years old. There were definitely some coverages where he just blatantly missed. And if this is the worst game he's going to have in this series, I can stomach that. But if he has another game where he looks completely lost, and to your point, he's over a -20 and the plus minus tonight, like you might have to rely on a Paul Reed, because we don't really know Isaiah Stewart's condition or his health, or if he's going to be good to go on Monday. Hopefully he is. Hopefully he could just kind of ice that knee, and maybe there's a little bit more mobility in it. Because tonight, even though he was gimping, I thought he did a pretty good job of battling down low, with the Mitchell Robinson and a Karl Anthony Towns. And it's funny because like a lot of Knicks reporters, like I was listening to podcasts on both sides, like there's no shot we see both of those guys on the court tonight. And Tibbs was like, yo, hold my beer. because
Yep.
I honestly thought, I was like, are they going to do a too big thing, or like they're going to play Stu and Dern together? They kind of try to match that together, but JB went with Tobias, and I thought Tobias to me was the MVP of the tonight. Just
Yeah.
picking up that scoring load that the Pistons needed. And to scroll in the timeline and see 76ers fans saying like Tobias never scored 20 points for us in a playoff game kind of made me chuckle and laugh a little bit, if I'm being
I,
honest.
I mean, it's amazing what you can do when you're respected across the board by your organization, by your teammates, by your coaching staff, and by your fan base. Right? It's amazing how much more comfortable you can be and how much better you can perform instead of being called the problem behind closed doors and on social media each and every time the team isn't doing well. Like Tobias, I again, he was outstanding tonight, and especially in that first half, he was just absolutely lights out. He had 22 of his 25 in the first half.
Yeah, that was not like, if you would have told me Tobias was scoring 20 points tonight, I would have thought we were going to win this basketball game.
Mhm.
But I didn't expect Cade to. I thought Cade did a okay job with the doubles, but I think in the fourth quarter, the way that they really blitzed him with Cat really threw him off. There was just so many turnovers with him, but I'm sure he'll watch the tape and get better as well. We do have a question from Bravo, and I think both of us are probably going to have the same answer. What sort of adjustments do we want to see? Do we play Marcus Sasser? I'll let you take that one because I have some thoughts on it.
Yeah, I don't know if you play Sasser just yet. I mean, it's certainly something that you can look at. I think the big thing is just getting. I think you just got to get Cade going earlier and more often. I think, especially now that he's gotten through game one, and you and I are kind of even talking about this too. Of Cade's the kind of guy where he will let the game develop before he tries to get his own game going. Right? Like he will
Mhm.
wait to see what coverages are being given. He will wait to see how he's being defended, what way the game's going. He generally prioritizes getting his guys going first because he knows he'll eventually get going. Right? He had 15 of his 21 in the second half. He was starting to look much more comfortable and poised as the game went on. So for me, I think it's just about getting K going earlier and more often, getting him off the ball more and allowing him to get the ball. Richard Jefferson actually I thought was making some really good analysis on some adjustments for Cade of getting the ball in the post and getting it lower, closer to the rim because he was really struggling when he was getting trapped and blitzed up in the perimeter. So I think if they can get Cade closer to the basket and get him to his spots, earlier in the shot clock, I think that's something that would really benefit this team. And I think just, I think quite frankly, I think if you're JB Bickerstaff, I think you show, I think you just show every single possession that they had a offensive 3 sec or a defensive 3 second or the 5 second violation, like all those little mental things that add up to me. Like those are kind of the big things. And then just continue to play physical on Jalen Brunson, but stay the heck out of foul trouble. Cause like when Asar and all those different defenders, when you were continuing to give Jalen Brunson those different looks defensively, was really when he was struggling to get going into the game. So as much as I would love to see Sasser, and I think he's someone that if you need an offensive spark plug off the bench, he's someone that you can certainly, look at as an option. And I think maybe that would be kind of like more realistic in a game 3 or 4 when it's at home and it's a less hostile environment. But to me, those are the things I'm kind of looking at. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are.
So I think the adjustments, what I was watching tonight is obviously when Cade has the ball at the top of the perimeter and they're blitzing him, I think the Knicks feel pretty confident that it's going to be a turnover or it's just going to be a really difficult pass. I think a way you can counteract that, and you touched on it, is have maybe Asar or even Dennis, for that matter, bring the ball up the court and try to find different opportunities for Cade to play off ball and try to catch the ball in the post. And if there's a mismatch there, if they try to double, just try to swing it out on the perimeter for three. But I don't really know if JB's really going to tinker with the playbook too much. With it being playoff basketball, there might be some situations where maybe Asar brings the ball up the court a little bit more than we're used to. just to get different looks and to see if the Knicks would actually double Asar. And if they're
Yep.
not going to, then you have opportunities for Cade to play off ball and just kind of run through picks. For the Sasser question, though, I would be very surprised if he plays, just given this season of he's just kind of been the odd man out, and it's not really his fault with having Tim and Malik here. And then you picked up Dennis at the deadline. I mean, unless there's an injury or unless JV's just absolutely desperate, I think that's when you do see a Marcus Sasser play. It's a tough spot for the kid because I think he's talented. It's just you have veterans in front of him right now that JB probably trusts a little bit more than a guy that's very young in his basketball career right now.
Yeah, I think that the rotations just get so tight
Hmm.
as the postseason really goes on. Like Ron Holland got 6 minutes in the first half. Made some good effort plays, but ultimately was kind of starting to struggle. So he didn't really get an opportunity in the second half to, pick it back up. So and even guys like Simone Fontecchio didn't get any minutes in this game. I think you're really just going, if anything, I think you're just only going to see that rotation tighten up. So I think he's certainly like, if Detroit ever needs to like experiment and want to try different things, and looking for a spark plug defensively off the bench, I think he's someone that could certainly be an option. I just think one thing that makes it really difficult about bringing Sasser into this series in particular is that even the Knicks second unit in some of their guards, like Campaign, has a lot of length. And so like for Marcus Sasser, I think that would be a pretty difficult matchup and could potentially, be a little bit of a liability on that side of the ball, with the way that the net, especially if Campaign's having games like this tonight. Good God.
Yeah, like him hitting just clutch shot. I forgot what of just a unorthodox shot he has because it's like
Yep.
it's almost like he's like twisted in when he
It,
shoots, and I was like, wow, man,
his,
like that goes
his feet
in.
are at like a 45-degree angle from like the basket, kind of like to like the right. And it's like, hey, if it goes in, it goes in. And he's good at getting his feet set and getting in that position. But it's just, yeah, it certainly looks unique to say the least.
Yeah, you have to just give him credit for hitting those big shots. Throughout his career, like he's kind of been known as a guy that likes to dance pregame, but he's kind of just. I remember him and Russell Westbrook really early on in his career. And a lot of people used to clown him for not being a basketball player that could impact scoring, but he's really developed quite a bit with New York. So you do have to give him that credit. Red Baron actually kind of had a comment about what an adjustment for all these guys regarding the rotation, totally different than anyone was used to. That's a lot to ask out of players who are used to playing within a role. The only player that we didn't really see tonight was Tech, and I
Yep.
I honestly thought Ron's minutes would have been way higher than they were. I get he's a rookie, but like he has impacted so much transition buckets. I was honestly surprised. Were you surprised he got less than 10 minutes tonight?
I wasn't entirely surprised, if I'm being honest, just because again, he is so young and he's such a high emotion player. And that game was starting to get more intense as it went on. There were some moments where it's starting to get a little bit chippier, a little bit more physical. And when you are talking about a game of margins, you kind of want to limit those some of those snafus if you really can. There was one moment tonight where there was somewhat of a tussle. I think tussle's even a stretch. There was just a moment where guys were talking and kind of tied up. Thankfully the refs just let it be, didn't call any technicals on that moment, which I'm glad. I think, which by the way, I think overall, like I was relatively pleased with how the refs called this game. Obviously, there was a obviously that Tim Hardaway call was rough, right? And that was just a flat out miss. But I mean, the Knicks only had 17 attempts at the free throw line tonight. Like Jalen Brunson only had 10 attempts, which honestly is not that bad for a Jalen Brunson game. He's someone that can get to the line very early and very often. So yeah, I would say overall, like kind of like you said, I don't think anyone that was necessarily being asked to do something out of the ordinary or something that they wouldn't, normally do during the season. It's just kind of like, if anything, your role is just only going to expand. Like your minutes, like if you're an integral part of this team, your minutes are just going to go up. That's just the way it is. Like Tobias Harris played 40 minutes tonight.
And I think that has more to do with I don't think that JB fully trusts Tech in these situations. He's had an up and down year, obviously, broke his foot really late into the offseason. Maybe he didn't have a full just offseason where he was able to work on his game and get stronger. But I think just throughout the season, he's been such a roller coaster where he has good games and then it's just a stretch of bad games. That's just the way I view it. Do you view it the same way that JB is just going to rely on Tobias to play 40 minutes because he doesn't really have maybe the confidence in a Simone Fontecchio to, give some minutes while Tobias is resting?
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things where once you get to the postseason, you start to realize who the coaching staff really relies on and who they really trust. And I think, kind of like you said, it has been a really up and down season for Simone. Like he is a good player, and there are moments where Simone has had solid performances, but I would just say, as a whole, if you're just looking at how the season went, and even kind of just down the stretch, he wasn't necessarily playing his greatest basketball either. It's just one of those things where you don't really want to exacerbate the problem, make it worse, which would
Hmm.
be putting him out in that type of scenario and putting him, out there bright and early. I think, again, if you're looking at potential areas where you could see these guys into the series, it is when you go home because it is less pressure. It is, a friendlier environment. It is, like there is inherently, it is like inherently just easier to play when you're at your home, when you're at your home court. But I just, again, I just think that as that rotation just really starts to shrink, you're just going to see some of those guys who have kind of been up and down, or their roles haven't always been the most defined. That's just kind of when, for lack of better terms, their season's kind of over.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, all last week, we were talking about like Tech probably gets his minutes reduced just because Tobias is just such a steady veteran out there, um,
Mhm.
for JB. But like, you have your questions now. What this team needs, you need a backup power forward. Now, could that be Bobby Klitman? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I like him as a prospect, but I think he needs a lot of developing, a lot of playing time. Um,
It's almost
I
like that summer league footage was just summer league.
yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but I mean, like, a game like tonight, I mean, if you're a Piston fan and obviously the series isn't over, but you can definitely take notes of like what this team could possibly need in the off season. And I definitely think you have conversations about trying to upgrade that backup small forward, power forward position, or more power forward position. I don't know why I said small forward because I think Ron is kind of like uh, just penciled in with that. I thought he was going to get way more minutes, but maybe I expected too much out of a rookie. And to your point, maybe JB, relies on him a little bit more at home because it's more of an environment that he's used to, and you don't want him crashing out game one and getting suspended, which you just don't want that to happen.
Yeah, Ron's a high emotion player, and you absolutely, you love the passion that he brings. But you could even start to see it, like at the end of his 6 minutes, in the first half, you could even just start to see the emotion kind of starting to overcome it a little bit. And maybe it's just one of those moments where you kind of have to protect your rook, let him kind of sit back and really learn by observing. So, again, I don't think it's JB losing faith in anyone, or like not having trust in these guys. It's just when push comes to shove, you need the guys on the court that you know for a fact are going to deliver. And a guy like
Hmm.
Tobias Harris, multiple times JB is referred to essentially as having another coach on the court. So that's a guy that when it gets to this time of the season, when it's someone that you yourself has said is like another coach, that is really hard to take off the court.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like him just being just such a focal point throughout the season, it doesn't surprise me. Um, just the veteran presence that he is. I thought all the veterans did their job tonight. It's just I think the young guys were just kind of like, oh, this is what the playoff is like. This is what
Exactly.
playing in the playoffs is like. And their vets probably talked to them in the locker room saying like, you guys are going to see what the playoffs is like. It's not like the regular season. Everything's much tighter, down to the finest detail. That's why I thought tonight's game was a perfect learning experience because for 3 quarters, I thought they did a pretty good job. It's just that fourth quarter collapse is where you kind of saw the inexperience, in my opinion, anyways, for the young
Yeah,
guys.
I think there's probably a natural assumption that the way that this team plays basketball is so naturally set up for the playoffs that it wasn't going to be as much of a transition for these guys as they maybe thought it was. I think once reality kind of smacks you in the face and you start to see that lead dwindle away and you have that raucous Madison Square Garden crowd with like every celebrity that you could think of from the city of New York, sitting courtside right there. And all of a sudden you just see that absolutely dwindle away. It's difficult for anyone, right? Even a guy like a Cade Cunningham, who is as talented as he is, who is only, who has had seasons at his age that only Oscar Robertson has replicated. Even for him, it's like 23 years old, first playoff game, like, oh man, that's that's different, right? So again, I expect them to be better, and I think the level of intensity uh will only go up from this team as the series goes on. I think just the big thing was they played with a lot of energy in the first 3 quarters, and I think they just expected to just be able to continue to play at that level in the fourth. But the fourth quarter, especially in the postseason, is when teams turn things up to their highest level. And that, like you said, is like when you have to be at your highest level of intensity and execution, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. It's a good teachable moment, and we do have some Knicks fans in here. Some of them are friendly, some of them are talking shit. Which, hey, you know what? I've had my piece with Knicks fans. I've been on podcasts with them. Um, I like to think that I'm in pretty good standing with them. Maybe not. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. We actually have a Knicks fan in here, Anthony. So the Pistons have a good young team, but definitely not ready. For the Knicks yet. I want to say this, Sean. I think the comparisons between both teams are completely different. If I'm a Knicks fan and I have a team like I have, my expectations are way higher than a Detroit Pistons fan. Like if I'm a Knicks fan, I'm expecting to get out of the first round. I'm expecting to see Boston in the second round. Championship or bust, in my opinion. Like you have so many talented players, but what's just kind of like your assessment between both of the teams?
Yeah, I think the Knicks are a great team. I think 1 through 5, they have one of the best, like lineups in basketball, especially when you talk about being built for the postseason, being built to, play against a team like a Boston, a team like Cleveland. We might have questions about what Boston or about what New York can do in the second round and beyond and what they can do as far as like contention, but they're a 50-win team for a reason. Tom Thibodeau is one of the best coaches in basketball for a reason, and Jalen Brunson has been one of the best point guards in basketball for a reason. And I think you saw a lot of that play out as the game went on tonight. I think if you're the Pistons, I think the reasons why you felt good about this matchup and why you felt like you could compete in this matchup played out. I think the Knicks still are and should be considered the favorites because they are the more experienced team. They are the team that was composed to contend for championships. Like you said, like this is a team in Detroit that has completely different expectations, that is playing with literal house money, with what they were supposed to be and what they are now. This is a team that was hoping to be hopeful for the play-in. This is a team that didn't even have to ponder the play-in for the final month of the season. They were locked in essentially to the postseason. It was just whether they were gonna get the 5th or 6th seed, right? So, I think for the Pistons, obviously, they were not ready for the moment tonight, specifically in the 4th quarter. I still think they have reasons to feel optimistic about the series as it goes on. I'm not saying the Pistons are definitely gonna win or that they should feel like they're going to win, but I think if anything, what those first 3 quarters taught you was you can hang with this team. And I think the physicality, the way that these 2 teams match up, I think it's closer than I think some Knicks fans wanted to give it credit for. I think Pistons fans, the reason why they felt confident, and again, why they felt confident going into this series, I think that really played out, especially in that second and third quarter. So, again, it's going to be fascinating to see how these teams play in game two, and then going into Detroit, what that series is going to look like. But I think both teams have reasons to feel good about where they're at, because they both, I think, played better than they would have expected, given the fact that both of their star players weren't necessarily in the game in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Pistons fans, we're happy to be here, right?
Yeah.
Going from 14 games last year to 44 is a hell of an accomplishment. Um, I know I've seen some Pistons fans that think that they can win the series, and I'm never going to tell a fan how to fan. But I think when you look at the Knicks and their playoff experience and how much assets that they've spent to get an OG Anunoby, a Carl Anthony Towns, even a Jalen Brunson for that matter, like this is a team that I think has very high expectations. And I know I did see some Knicks fans before the fourth quarter even started saying like this is absolutely disgusting. This is embarrassing. How are we losing to the Detroit Pistons? Because their expectations are very high. I'm not saying that Pistons fans don't have high expectations. There are certain fans in the fan base that hold them to a very high standard. But just my assessment and how I'm feeling is good teachable moments. You're going to find out what this team possibly needs in this offseason, and you can just kind of reassess and um, have those conversations and those opinions throughout the season. I still think this is going to be a very competitive series. I think it could possibly go 6-7 games depending on how it shakes out. Like if they compete for a full 48 and not a 36, it could definitely go 7 games. I
Mhm.
think they played well for 36 minutes tonight, and the Knicks just took full advantage of that fourth quarter and the turnovers.
Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable that this series is gonna go at least 5 or 6. I think Detroit, the way that they played, it was so competitive. I have a hard time seeing this series being a sweep, especially, just the Knicks, some of their inconsistency as well, just kinda shown through in this game. Like, the Knicks are not by no means like, they're a very good team. They are by
Mhm.
no means a perfect team, which is why this is, in theory, a winnable series for the Pistons. I agree with you. I think that anyone that's like, I think there's been maybe a little bit overconfidence and expectation that the Pistons are going to win this series. I think again, it's important to remember like the perspective of what this playoff run actually means. It's significant that this team is here at all. And although I think the expectation should be to go out and win at least one game, I think, like I don't think it would be overly disappointing if this team didn't win a playoff game. Like, it's not like this team would have to have like hard conversations this summer. Now, this series could affect again how you look at an extension for like a Jalen Duren.
Mhm.
This could affect like what, like how aggressive you want to be in making trades going into next season, like how you want to shape your roster. So again, like this is where Trajan really gets to see as that pressure really molds, and as the fire, really starts to burn, the intensity turns up. He gets to see what these guys are really made of.
What you just said scares the living crap out of me. Um, One, the Dern extension, because I've seen some Pistons fans throw out some insane numbers, which I'm not saying that players shouldn't get paid. I'm all about players getting paid, but some of the numbers that fans have brought up on these podcasts kind of just blow my mind. I'm like, are you sure? Like, let's wait to the playoffs and we can get a better understanding of what possibly Jalen Duren is and isn't.
Mhm.
Um, and then the Trajan Langdon thing, it's like, I don't want this team to just put all their chips and then it kind of backfires, like I, I I said last week that I would be okay kind of running it back and being an over the cap team. I mean,
Mhm.
am I crazy to kind of think that, or like what's your opinion on like what they should, possibly do? Um, Not even like taking account with this, playoff matchup.
I think that if you're Trajan Langdon and you're the Pistons, I think there's 2 teams that you look at and as a cautionary tale for how you move forward. It's the Sacramento Kings and it's the Phoenix Suns. On one hand, you have the Phoenix Suns who essentially sacrificed the entirety of their culture that got them to a finals to go get Kevin Durant. And and essentially took all the assets that they had remaining to go get Bradley Beal. And it's a very talent, like very like high talent, like top heavy roster that has no maneuverability or mobility going forward, and they are the only team that did not participate in the postseason or the draft lottery. So if you want to talk about being an absolute hell, that is where the Phoenix Suns are at. So if you're Trajan, that's the cautionary tale to not be overly aggressive. But then on the other hand, you look at the Sacramento Kings, who a couple years ago were the second seed in the Western Conference. They went and made, they went and made like a really like deep playoff run. Everyone was like, man, look how exciting it is to be a Sacramento Kings fan. They have a bright future for years to come. And then they miss out on the Pascal Siakam deal. They miss out on, like all these other like Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges. Like they wanted to go and get and be aggressive and go at around those teams. And they waited too long. And by the time they went and got a DeMar DeRozan, it didn't mean a damn thing. De'Aaron Fox wanted out. Jaden Ivey hit that corner three and essentially cost Mike Brown his job because ownership, essentially got fed up and saw that front office kind of fall apart. So I think if you're I think if you're Trajan Langdon, you have to look at some of these situations throughout the league. And that's why it's so damn difficult to be an executive in this league, because talk about a tightrope that you have to walk. Because if you go out and you are overly aggressive this summer and then they underperform, then you probably blew your one chance to go and make a trade around a Cade Cunningham going forward. But if you do nothing over the course of the next couple of years and this group sputters out like we've seen Pistons team do in the past, then you're going to go like, oh, well, why didn't you do anything to go and put something alongside of Cade Cunningham? So that's why, like, whatever moves that this team makes going forward, that's why they have to be absolutely sure that they're the right decisions. And if anything, I err more on your side of erring on the side of caution and not straying too far from their original plan, because they talked about whether or not they were going to go and add, via trade at this deadline and be more aggressive and go and take that type of swing. But they talked about how they wanted to let this group play out and see what they do. And listen, I still think this group I think this group deserves to stay as intact as possible and start the season together next year. To me, I think the approach should be let this group play through the trade deadline, see where they're at then. And then by that point, it's probably going to be a completely different landscape. As we've seen, anybody can become available at any given time. So I think patience is nothing but Detroit's friend here, especially when you have a lot of guys that are, like already kind of tied up, or you do have some of those decisions coming up. And as far as Jalen Duren goes, if he has a rough playoffs, if I'm honest with you, Anthony, I don't really feel bad about the prospect of putting Jalen Duren in a prove it year and seeing what he gets in restricted free agency. That's one thing that you have to consider, is even if the Pistons do say, hey, okay, that's the market, they can match whatever comes back. I don't know if a team's going to look at Jalen Duren and sign this overly massive contract. You could have perhaps some desperate teams. We've seen small market teams in the past go out and make big swings in restricted free agency. But like, if Jalen Duren doesn't like have a great postseason and we have more questions than answers after how all this plays out, I think the Pistons, quite frankly, like, I think if there's any player that could use that type of motivation, I think Jalen Duren's that type of guy.
Yeah, I see both sides of the fence with the fans, and S. Mahoney brings up such a great quote, because Trajan said this multiple times during his introductory press conference,
Yep.
saying, I think he brought up don't want to skip steps. And
Mhm.
that's important. But to, some fans' point, it's like we have Cade. He's probably going to make an all NBA team this year. He took that leap that, some fans expected him to take, and they're happy that he took that leap. But in another breath, it's like you don't want to, waste that opportunity to try to make the team try for the team to get better. I'm
Right.
just kind of nervous of, like, you mentioned the Kings, which I think is a really good example, because like number 2 in the West, and then things just kind of fell apart with the coach. And like, obviously, I don't really know if that'll happen with the Pistons and JB, because I feel like a lot of these young guys really love the message and what he stands for. I don't really think a coaching thing would really affect this locker room. I think what would affect this team is putting all your chips on the table. And I'm just going to throw this guy's name out there because I see a lot of Pistons fans still talk about him. And it's like, do they just get crazy and freaky and say, "Hey, Joe D, what do you want for Zion?" Because I keep seeing that flow. I'm sure you've seen it too. Like, I've seen Zion, I've seen Domantas Sabonis. Like, I've just seen like guys that a lot of Pistons fans are just, really zeroing in on, of trying to make their team better. And I get it, but at the same time, as a fan, like, I would just kind of caution, like, you better be sure, like, those players that you're trying to trade for can get you from a 44, 6 seed up to a top 4 seed and try to compete with the Bostons and the New Yorks and the Clevelands. Like, and if they can't, then you have hard conversations and you get in a situation where Atlanta is right now. Like,
Yep.
Atlanta had such a good season a few years ago. They paid everybody, and then they're like, "Oh shit, we're not as good as we thought we were." And like, the way Trae Young kind of crashed out and went out, like, there's conversations about trading their franchise player, and I don't want that to happen to the Pistons. I don't want them to have conversations where, like, well, we paid everybody, maybe this our franchise player is the problem, because I think it's a very slippery slope when you do go after guys and pay guys.
I also think you have to make sure that whatever guy that you're bringing in absolutely unequivocally fits your culture and what you're about. And I just don't know if Zion Williamson's that guy. I mean, I don't
Mm.
know how you can make that justification when he's missed just as much, if not more games throughout his career than he's played. And I think if I made this point with Brendan Ingram, this point rings perhaps even more true with Zion Williamson. If there is anybody in the world that knows whether or not Zion Williamson's worth going out and getting, it is Trajan Langdon. In fact, I think if you're Trajan Langdon, I think you have a pretty damn difficult time looking at a Zion Williamson trade and going, yeah, sign me up for that, because your old boss just got fired for trying to continue to build around Zion and keeping on letting that go and keeping on giving that a chance. So I think that's something that you absolutely have to consider. I know Pistons fans would absolutely love like a Devin Booker as well. And that's someone, listen, I'm Grand Rapids native here. Like, Devin Booker is one of my favorite players of all time. Would absolutely love to see Devin Booker in a Detroit uniform, but you'd have to be absolutely 100% sure that he would have long enough of a runway, and this team would have enough to contend immediately. And as much as I love Devin Booker, I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case. I don't know if you're getting a much better team than what you got in Phoenix last year. It'd probably have a better record because it'd be out in the Eastern Conference and not having to be in the West. But I just think, I mean, especially when you talk about like how hard of a salary cap this league has, talk about like tying it up very quickly.
Yeah, that new CBA, a lot of these contracts, like, I look at a team like Denver. Denver's going to have to make tough decisions,
Yep.
especially with their books. Like, Jamal Murray, Jokic, and Michael Porter Jr. Like, they don't win a championship, like, they're probably going to break up that core. But
Mhm.
I'm just so cautious with Pistons fans, and I know me and you were like on the Ingram stuff like all trade season. We're like, no, no, don't go after a guy that has injury history. And you're right, Trajan knows all those Pelican guys really well. The only Pelican guy that I would actually make a trade for is like Trey Murphy. That's it. Like,
Yep.
that's the only one I would actually want. Maybe a Herb Jones if I can't get a Trey Murphy, but like. Um, this hasn't really been an organization that, outside of the Rasheed Wallace trade, really has really gone out and got a quote unquote star. Like, they've always kind of got guys that were, cusp all stars and kind of made it work that way.
Yeah. I think another thing, like talking about the Kings Pistons comparison that the Pistons have going for them, is that unlike Vivek Ranadive, I think Tom Gores is an owner who legitimately does not want to meddle in the day-to-day operations. I think he legitimately wants to hire the basketball person to make the basketball decisions and to trust them to run the organization, because I think he's seen enough, just him being kind of at the forefront of making some of those decisions just does not work. Whereas if you hear what's going on in Sacramento, all the tales suggest that all the turmoil and the bad decisions that surrounded the Kings this season had Vivek Ranadive's fingerprints all over them. So I think if you're, I think if you're the Pistons, like the biggest thing that you want to see is just that continual trust in Trajan Langdon and his team to continue to make those decisions. And quite frankly, I don't really have much concern or worry at this point that that's going to change, because everything I've heard and seen, from Detroit and how they view Trajan Langdon is how enamored and how impressed they've been just with, how smart he is, how calculated he is, and, like how close to his plan he sticks. So I think that's the big thing. Is I know obviously during these types of losses, it can be easy to start
Mhm.
to get kind of doom and gloom pretty quickly. But I think ultimately, I think the Pistons, they wouldn't be in this spot to begin with if they didn't have smart people in the right spots making good decisions that were in the best interest of the franchise. I don't think you have a Nico Harrison here who's not looking at this from a long-term view.
Defense wins championships.
Dude, so you know what's funny? I texted Mike Curtis, our friend who used to cover the Pistons of the Detroit News. He was one of the 15 people that was at that Nico Harrison press conference that wasn't recorded. And I said, dude, you covered the Pistons. And have you ever heard the phrase defense wins championships more in your life? And he said, absolutely not. Like he covered the Pistons and he never heard that phrase that much.
I remember Troy Weaver saying, I've never seen a jump shooting team win a championship," but I'm like, did you watch Steph Curry and Klay Thompson? Like, someone told me that Nico Harrison is just a more Dallas version of Troy Weaver. And I was just like, I don't know about that, man.
I mean, he does like them as bigs. He only,
He
like, can you
does.
imagine? It's like, hey, we need a point guard. And he goes out and adds Marvin Bagley this summer. If he adds Marvin Bagley, then he truly is Troy Weaver South.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets Ben Simmons, then I'm out. I'm out.
Oh my gosh. That's a team that I think is probably going to be a Kevin Durant team in the
Yeah.
summer. And I'm going to be honest, I don't even know if Kevin Durant makes that team more tantalizing to me. I just don't know.
Yeah, Dallas, like, Mike, like, shout out to Mike because like he went from leaving the Pistons midseason to covering the NBA Finals to covering a play-in tournament and then covering basically a roundtable exit interview where there are no cameras whatsoever. Like, just talk about just like a wild like 12 months for that guy.
I told Mike he needs to write a book, and I'm dead serious on that. Like, to go from covering a 28 game losing streak to an NBA Finals to the craziest trade in the history of the league and all the turmoil that's going on in Dallas as a result. Like, can you think of like a crazier, like, first like 2 or 3 seasons covering the league, like, ever?
I think the only other beat reporter that might be able to top that is Vinny Goodwill when he first started covering the Detroit Pistons, like during the dark years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't even know if that would could, like, really compare because, like, when Vinny was covering, like, the Pistons were kind of like the sad boys, and it was, like, just, like, people not showing up to practice and stuff like that. But, I mean, like, what Mike has, like, gone from, like, covering the finals to the play-in tournament to, like, you can, only come to this press conference if you say nice things about us is I've never seen that in professional sports. It's kinda like what the White House is doing right now.
Yeah, as someone that's been in those press conferences, to hear someone say that you cannot record even the audio is just absolutely unheard of. Like, that is about as transparent of reactionary, afraid PR as you're gonna get in the league. And yeah, those are certainly some unique circumstances to be operating under. I'll never forget. the Pistons played the Mavericks the night before that trade happened, and so I'll never forget seeing Mike in some of those Dallas writers that night before, and just the innocence that was in their eyes, and how little they knew how much their lives were going to change in a 24-hour span.
I don't want to give the Pistons credit, but it kind of seemed like every time we played a team, like before the trading deadline or during the trading deadline, like they made like a blockbuster trade. It
Yeah,
was the
like it broke
wildest thing.
teams. Yeah, it broke teams when they lost to Detroit this year. Like the Kings gave up one of their greatest coaches in the history of the franchise. Teams literally like made altering decisions about their future after Pistons losses. And I think it's because they probably thought the Pistons were not nearly as good as they actually are. So if I'm the Kings, like I don't really feel that bad about that loss in retrospect. I mean, yeah, it was a bad loss. I mean, like they were on a slide. It was not going well, but I mean, probably shouldn't have fired Mike Brown over it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you basically just reassembled the Western Conference Bulls in Sacramento. Like that's
Oh,
all it
dude.
is.
Oh, Bulls West now in purple. I love it, dude. It's great. Let's go.
I saw the light the beam, and so I think it was the guy that runs Lake's show. He like photoshopped like the L, and I was like, Doc, like NBA playoffs have been so entertaining. I shouldn't have been so much. I was so entertained with that Heat being a 10 seed making the playoffs. I'm like, bro, like that is such a Miami Heat thing to do.
They are the absolute play-in merchants. No matter how much turmoil is going on in their franchise through hell and high water, they could come in with only like four guys eligible to play, and they'll find a way to scrap it out in advance and move on, especially when they go against teams who aren't really known for their culture and don't necessarily have much of one established, like the Bulls and the Hawks. So, like the fact that the Heat were able to kind of inflict their will in those games and kind of like get over the hump isn't entirely surprising from that sense. But I'll say this much: I'm not I wouldn't necessarily feel super confident about what they're going to be able to do against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
It'd be hilarious if they beat them. Like that
That
would
would
be
be
so. That would just like you want to talk about Adam Silver never like wanting to get away from tournaments. Just like, well, see, this is why we do tournaments. Like this is
Mhm.
why. Like that would just be like Atlanta Hawks esque, where that team that Dennis Schroeder was on, where they won like 60 straight and they lost to LeBron. Like you imagine like a 30-win team in the Heat like beating a 60-win team. That
Yep.
would be hilarious.
Oh my
Oh man,
gosh,
but
man. It would be unreal. I think JB Bickerstaff would be like, well, apparently I wasn't the problem.
I'm sure both of us are going to just be locked in until like June. Like we're just going to be watching playoff basketball for the next
Well,
2 months.
my social calendar's gone. I've been watching basketball just about all day today. I got the Timberwolves Lakers game on the monitor right now as this is going on. It's been an awesome day of hoops. I really think even like the fandom aside, I thought the Pistons Knicks game was probably the strongest of the day, right up there with that Nuggets Clippers finish was really good too. Um,
Russell
yeah, I, I
Westbrook legacy game.
Dude, and these are just the first round matchups. That's the crazy part. Is like I I I feel like I say this every year, but I can't remember a year where we've had this quality of matchups round one.
It's been amazing. Like I fall victim of watching so much Pistons games. Like come playoff time, I challenge myself to watch every first round series.
Yep.
Like you, I'm watching the Lakers game on an illegal stream, and like what's really funny about this illegal stream is it's got Trump and it's like Mexican healthcare, and I keep laughing at it. But man, like you gotta love those illegal streams watching
Dude,
games.
just exposing yourself in 4K like that. Like it's like, hey guys, I watch illegal streams. My name's Anthony. Check my IP address.
I really
Get
don't
them,
care, man.
boys.
Like I know people that like work down at like TV stations here, and dude, like they use it. Like, yeah, I use it too. Like Like even LeBron James uses Stream East. Like if we're being honest.
Roger. We got a report of a local man watching an illegal stream to catch this Minnesota Timberwolves playoff game. Get that mother. Get him, boys.
I gotta get me one of those one of these days, man. I really do.
I have way too much fun with it. It's not great, but
maybe I'm just dumb.
I gotta get me one of those soundboards. Those are
maybe I'm just dumb.
I have way too much fun with that.
Oh, man, you should get into DJing, honestly.
And just make dubstep, but all the beat drops are just Mike Valletti quotes.
Where Mike was wrong. Oh man,
maybe I'm just dumb.
Boom, 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 boom. Like that would go so hard. That is a bar. The way Sean is so stupid makes you know what, dude? My mom says that every single day. So you and her have that in common.
I appreciate you coming on, making me cry because I'm laughing so it's always, man. I just love doing podcasts with you. Like you're probably
it's always
one of my
a pleasure,
favorite,
man. I have a great time.
You're one of my favorite people just to reach out to if you are available to come on these podcasts. But I do want to give you the floor to plug and promote your YouTube channel, what you're working on, and man, I just watched your last podcast with Keith Flex-Trudeau. Loved it. For people that haven't watched it, definitely go check that out. Really good podcast with what you and Troy do over there.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, Keith is awesome. Absolutely love having him on. Be sure you go check out From Half Court, where we'll be doing all sorts of playoff coverage and doing even more pods throughout that. Also doing a new show on the Leggy Sports channel called 313 Connect. Myself, Leggy, and Brennan from Detroit Bad Boys are all just kind of it's kind of similar to a show I used to do back in the day called Wilbur Pistons Table Talk, where it's a lot more lighthearted. We're kind of just coming together and just picking jabs and just kind of trying to create community. So go and check that out as well. But Anthony, seriously, always love coming on. Thanks for having me. If you're looking for someone to join you regularly during the playoffs, would love to. But yeah, man, always enjoy joking around and talking hoops with you.
Honestly, man, we gotta get the Avengers back together. Like just reach out to Leggy. Like I'm open to have anyone on these podcasts. I'm usually doing them solo anyways. And sounding like a jackass, not making sense, and just rambling. But hey, man, like I always enjoy just talking with you or anyone that wants to come on this podcast.
And now you get to be a jackass with company.
Jackass, yeah, honestly, man. Well, we'll see you guys Monday because I'm not doing a podcast on Easter. I'm probably just gonna chill with the fam. People that are watching, hope you guys have a happy Easter and a good rest of your weekend. Have a good night, you guys. Peace.
Go Pistons.
Go Pistons.